Hello everyone, my name is Lladro Valle. I'm an incoming senior at Milpitas High School. The sponsoring Lions Club for my student speaker contest would be San Jose Caisan Unity Lions Club. And this is going to be my submission for the student speaker contest for the year 2020. Now let's begin. Hollywood, Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Sacramento are the first cities people will associate with California. Relaxed, progressive, and liberal. These are the adjectives that sum up California culture. To many, California seems like a utopia, but to a resident for their whole life, California has its many downfalls, which include a degrading rising housing market, traffic, and we all know about the traffic, from dusk to dawn, and the worst case of homelessness by far. Specifically focusing on homelessness in California, the discussion can be based on two parts: causes and solutions. Now, although it may have not affected us personally, homelessness is a prominent issue, specifically in California, which has 25% of the nation's homeless population. Having encountered homeless people every single day, whether it be in the median of a busy street asking for spare change, on the sidewalk of a 7-Eleven, or in a park digging in the trash, Californians have been accustomed to having a person sleeping on the streets. Now, of course, it's common etiquette to help them out during these tough times by giving them a blanket, some food, or your spare change. But it's also unavoidable to wonder, do they really deserve my help? Regardless, what needs to happen is a permanent solution. And in order for a permanent solution to occur, what's needed is to lay out the causes, which are discrimination, uncontrollable rent, and an ineffective shelter system, and then later propose lifelong solutions. Now, when first thinking of causes of homelessness, discrimination rarely comes to mind, and I know it did not come to my mind when I first researched about it, but it may be the most persistent cause of homelessness. Looking into the demographics of homelessness, African Americans make up a quarter of California's homelessness, even though they only account for an eighth of the population. Now, some may argue that this is due to their innate characteristics, but in fact, the government has failed them yet again. As stated in a Cal Matters article on homelessness, they put it as racial discrimination in rental housing, higher rates of poverty among black families, and overrepresentation in the state's incarceration and child welfare systems all contribute to the high number of African Americans experiencing homelessness. And this just exposes the true reasons of the disproportionality. The federal government and realtors have let prejudice run over equality as they continue to burden and weight down African Americans and people of color behind everyone's back. From my research, I also found that unreasonable rents and housing costs have destroyed families all throughout California. Everyone here knows a family member who has slipped up on a couple of utility bills or continues to live paycheck by paycheck. We can all thank inflation for this, the booming of housing costs. Since 2012, we've seen a 70% increase in housing costs, but not an increase in pay rate. As the Coalition of the Homeless puts it, the gap between incomes and housing costs has grown dramatically wider over the past 3 decades, yet nothing is done on the wide-scale problem. What's bringing people closer to poverty is the stagnant pay rate, as the housing rates keep getting higher and higher and higher, almost seeming unreachable. No wonder why people have no choice but to either move to another state, go buy a mobile house, or go plain homeless. It's unbearable. And so, instead of building more houses, what's needed is to either raise the minimum wage or to control the rising rents to a maximum. With a raised minimum wage or controlled rent, people will have more time to organize their lives and make sure they do not slip up. For the people who say controlled rent is putting higher prices for other people, you're simply wrong. Taking New York City, for example, these rent-regulated apartments show an increase in usage and help these impoverished families stay off the streets. And in fact, the controlled rent differences are paid off by the local governments. Now, focusing more on the solutions and with a more proactive approach, We need to shelter these people for the sake of the community and self-preservation. What's needed is either government-funded or private donor-funded shelters. But I'm not just talking about regular shelters, the ones that just sit around there. I'm talking about maintained ones. As also stated in the same Cal Matters article on homelessness, what needs to take place is shifting the focus to housing first. We need to invest money into a growing stock of low-barrier shelter beds, rapid rehousing units, and permanent supportive housing so that everyone is off the streets. The shelters need to be cared for and groomed, not just left alone for other people to deal with. Get the local nonprofits, businesses, the whole community involved on enriching the community by helping the needy. And this has already been in effect in California's very own Riverside and Houston, Texas, where both cities have seen a drop in homelessness once the community gets involved. Now, talking about the new shelters, we need to make them useful. Rather than a plain old unit where people just live and sit down, envision this shelter as a breeding ground for developing responsible citizens out of these shelters. Now, some people may bring up the pre-existing shelters, the ones that have wilted away or the ones that aren't in use anymore. The best way to improve a shelter is to have a program in place that benefits both the workers and the homeless. When looking into a permanent supportive housing, filing people in the shelters will never fix the problem. The shelter must alter the lifestyle of the homeless. Focusing more on making tenants pass sobriety tests, take job trainings, or providing life courses, for example, will greatly change how the homeless will live after they leave the shelters. For example, in exchange for sleeping in a shelter, homeless people will be expected to complete at least 3 job applications per day, with a permanent staff member helping them with a resume, attire, and proper etiquette using the shelter's funds. The dietary restrictions can be settled 2 ways. One, by having the homeless feed themselves, and another by having a communal refrigerator or communal dining hall. And in case of any trace of drugs in their system, the tenant can immediately get kicked out or simply punished. To finish it off, the epidemic of homelessness has been swept under the rug for numerous years with futile policies in place. The 3 solutions I discussed today, increasing the minimum wage, controlling rent, and upholding an effective shelter system, will not solve the entire problem of homelessness. But it is a step in the right direction, and it is better than the current policies in place. Looking back on my schooling, my teachers have always told me, if there's a will, there is a way. But the will on solving homelessness needs to come as a collective. We need you, the adults, us, the youth, and bring the whole entire community together to help bring change to this growing dilemma by advocating for a solution to your government officials and proposing the solutions I discussed today. Thank you so much.